National Black History Month dates to 1915 when historian and author Dr. Carter G. Woodson founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History. It was through that organization that Dr. Woodson initiated the first Negro History Week in February of 1926. Dr. Woodson chose that week in February because it was the birth week of two monumental figures in the history of Black Americans. The first was the 16th President of the United States, Abraham Lincoln, who issued the Emancipation Proclamation on January 1st, 1863, in which he declared that all persons held as slaves within the rebellious states are thenceforward and forever free. The second, a man that Lincoln consulted as he wrote the Emancipation Proclamation, was born into slavery February of 1818 on Maryland's Eastern Shore, and given the name Frederick Augustus Bailey. Bailey's early life was spent on the Lloyd Plantation, the same plantation where his grandparents were enslaved. His mother, also a slave, was sold after his birth and saw him only 4 or 5 times during his life. Around the age of 5, Bailey was sold to Captain Anthony, who owned a farm 12 miles from his grandparents' enslaver. He also owned 3 of Bailey's siblings, whom he met there for the first time. At the age of 7, Captain Anthony transferred Bailey to his son-in-law's brother, Mr. Hugh Auld of Fells Point in Baltimore. In this house, he had the misery of a ruthless and demanding master, yet was given an unintended gift by Hugh Auld's wife, Sophia. Sophia was initially kind and gracious to Bailey, while unknowingly planting within him a seed that grew inside of Bailey and later yielded the fruit of a man we now know as Frederick Douglass.
Very soon after I went to live with Mr. and Mrs. Auld, she very kindly commenced to teach me the ABC. After I'd learned this, she assisted me in learning to spell words of 3 or 4 letters. Just at this point of my progress, Mr. Auld found out what was going on and at once forbade Mrs. Auld to instruct me further, telling her, among other things, that it was unlawful as well as unsafe to teach a slave to read. To use his own words, further, he said, "Now, if you teach that nigger," speaking to myself, "how to read, there be no keeping him. It would forever unfit him to be a slave. He'd at once become unmanageable and of no value to his master." I now understood what had been to me a most perplexing difficulty, to wit, the white man's power to enslave the black man. From that moment, I understood the pathway from slavery to freedom. Though conscious of the difficulty of learning without a teacher, I set out with high hope and a fixed purpose, at whatever cost of trouble, to learn how to read.
What Auld feared of Douglass became a self-fulfilling prophecy. Slavery in Baltimore City at the time, while seemingly more convivial than what was seen on the rural Eastern Shore or in the South, was nonetheless slavery. By stripping Douglass of the attentive and patient teachings of Sophia, he awakened a ravenous hunger to learn and an insatiable desire to free his people and also himself. Douglass not only wanted to read, he sought to wash the inexcusable stain of slavery from this nation forever. Douglass made up his mind to escape the Auld home that sat at the corner of Allisana and South Durham. He hopped aboard a Pennsylvania, Wilmington, and Baltimore Railroad train in motion and headed north near Penn Station. He carried the protection pass of a free black sailor that he could use in lieu of the free papers required by railroad officials. He made it to Havre de Grace, where he boarded the country's first railway car ferry in order to cross the Susquehanna River. As he boarded a train on the other side of the river, he caught the gaze of a German blacksmith he'd known in Baltimore. The two men stared intently at each other, but as Douglass would later say, "I really believe he knew me, but had not the heart to betray me." Despite the perils, He arrived in New York on the morning of September 4th, 1838, and there he awaited the arrival of a free black housekeeper named Anna Murray from Baltimore. They quickly married and moved to safer refuge in New Bedford, Massachusetts, where he officially changed his name to Frederick Douglass and began his work as an abolitionist. In 1986, Congress passed Public Law 99-244, which designated February 1986 as National Black Afro-American History Month. President Ronald Reagan followed with Presidential Proclamation 5443 External, which proclaimed that the foremost purpose of Black History Month is to make all Americans aware of this struggle for freedom and equal opportunity. President Reagan's words are made stronger when coupled with those of President Gerald Ford over a decade earlier in 1975, when he issued a message on the observance of Black History Week External, urging all Americans to, quote, recognize the important contribution made to our nation's life and culture by Black citizens. In Fells Point and Baltimore as a whole, we are spoiled for choice when it comes to significant Black figures that have given life to our nation. Figures like Isaac Myers, a businessman and union leader who in 1866, along with other prominent Black leaders, created the nation's first Black shipyard in Fells Point at Kennard Wharf on Philpott Street in Fells Point. The company Myers created, the Chesapeake Marine Railway and Dry Dock Company, employed hundreds of Black and white caulkers and shipbuilders and served as the center of the city's shipbuilding industry for over 20 years. Fells Point hosted the early years of Billie "Lady Day" Holiday. Lady Day was one of the most iconic voices in modern music, with timeless tracks like the protesting tones of Strange Fruit and the melodic waves of life-loving notes provided by Summertime. Baltimore can boast the upbringing and the groundbreaking life of civil rights lawyer and the first African-American justice of the Supreme Court, Thurgood Marshall. And to bring it all together, Marshall attended Frederick Douglass High School in West Baltimore. The stories we tell during Black History Month are American history. Without one, the other would not exist. And we would be remiss if we didn't tell it just like that. I'd like to thank the supportive members of the UFPA Board and Education Committee. I'd also like to give a special thank you to Wendy Bozell and Bill Miltenberger for your direct contributions to this presentation. We'll continue to seek out stories that reveal the past, embrace the bright present, and empower the hopeful future of Fells Point. I'm George Croom, and I want to thank you for joining us on this first of many episodes of the Upper Fells Point Improvement Association Education Series. Until next time, be good to each other.